Ethan Wayne, welcome to the Passion Project.
Thanks,
I appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. It's fun. We were talking earlier, but the backstory is we live pretty close. You've lived here a long time. As was shown, anybody that would have been at Pete's Coffee 10 minutes ago, you couldn't get a coffee. Every single person in there, Ethan.
Must be old people that go to Pete's.
Well, there's some old and some young, but we'll talk about why everybody knows you here. And your counterpart, Finn is laying right here.
Yeah.
Goes, I think, everywhere with you. We'll talk about that as well, traveling with Finn.
Try to take him.
He's a
Life's
good boy.
better with him.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Life is better with a retriever for sure. But we have mutual friends. I think I met you through guys like Tim Carr a long time ago, but I see you walking Finn in the dark, down by the Newport Aquatic Center.
This is a late meeting for us.
I know,
We're
right?
usually earlier.
For sure. And I'm stoked. Well, listen, Ethan, you have a long history both here, and how you grew up is really cool and iconic and different than most people's, and we're going to talk about it. Your career's been incredible, and the good things that you do through the foundations that you guys run. And we're just going to talk. It's like, Ethan Wayne, this is your life. We're going to start at the beginning, talk about all the cool things and how you've gotten where you are now, where you're spending your time and the stuff you're doing. And
well, I don't want to brag, but way back in the day, I was a good swimmer. And I beat millions to the egg.
Millions to the egg? I don't know this.
Yeah, if you're going back to the beginning of life.
Oh, I wasn't going that far back. Well, that's true. But you have siblings, and so let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's start at the beginning, and we're going to weave our way through all this stuff.
Sure.
And there's all kinds of fun, but I'm going to ask you to be you, because when you get Ethan on, it's super fun. There's plenty of humor baked in. And one of the things I will say, like with your career and your background and your family and all the things that you've done, you're like the most normal, cool, approachable guy, and that's why I'm stoked to have you here.
Oh,
So
thank you, Mark.
Super cool.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think, who knows why that happens.
Yeah.
Why are some people...
Well, let's talk about it. I mean, let's talk about, because we'll lead into, I'm a big believer in osmosis, and how you grow up really, infers how you become.
Well,
so
I'll tell you, I think Newport Beach played a really big and significant role in my life, because my father was obviously a famous individual.
Well, I hadn't brought it up. Who was your father that was a famous individual?
My father was an actor. His name was John Wayne, and in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, he's probably he was without a doubt like the most prolific actor of the time. But lucky for me, he'd bought a boat. He bought a converted World War II minesweeper called the Wild Goose, and he put it down here in Newport Beach. Newport Beach was a place that he would come in his early life, when he was in high school. He'd come down here and body surf. So lucky for me, he was at a point in his career when I was born where he just decided to move the whole family down. So I think they literally waited for me to be born, and then we moved south. So I got to grow up here and not in Los Angeles.
And you're the youngest of...
I'm the youngest boy. I have a younger sister, Marisa.
Oh, you do?
She's
Oh, I thought
4
she
years
was-
younger than
okay, I
me to
didn't
the
realize
day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, to the day.
So you moved here. Did you guys move as soon as you were born? Like, did you move here within the first year of your life? Or?
As I understand it, we lived in a few places while his house was getting sort of fixed up. So maybe 2 or 3 years old.
Got it.
Finally found some permanence here, but all my schooling and friends and everything here. But Newport was insignificant. People didn't live here in the wintertime. They went back to their regular homes.
Well, we're going to get to that, because anybody that's lived here for as long as you have, and you're a few years older than me, and I was the same thing. I moved here when I was about a year old, so I've been here 54 years.
Yeah.
Even I was seeing it very differently. And what's interesting is how we grew up is probably very, very different. My parents, this was like their first real stop, and they kind of grew from here. And you guys came down, just very different, but in the same community. I have very clear memories of how sleepy it was. But I'm really excited to dig into that, talk about the Wild Goose and all the things. But let's step back a little bit further. So obviously, Dad's John Wayne, that's Hollywood and all that. But talk about where you were born. Where were you guys living before you moved down here?
Encino.
You were in Encino.
Yeah. So he worked under contract with a studio called Republic, and they were over there in the valley. And so he had a 5-acre place in Encino that I literally have no memories of it. I remember seeing photos of it, but I have no memories of the property. But he ended up selling that to one of the Disneys, and I guess it's still in their family.
Wow.
It's quite a spot, evidently.
You know, it's interesting. I had some family, my in-laws lived in Encino for a long time. I'd never spent any time there prior to probably 15 years ago, but you would always hear about all the celebrities that would work in Hollywood, but they would live on the outskirts where they can get land, kind of get out of the scene.
Yeah.
But Newport also had a lot of that too, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
sure.
so let's just jump to that. So,
I mean, I don't know if you remember, but Newport was surrounded by orange groves and strawberry fields and asparagus and like miles of eucalyptus windbreaks. And as a kid, man, you could just go anywhere, right? Like total freedom. I could leave Bay Shores and go to the beach. We could go down to the horse ranch in Corona del Mar, which is now Crystal Cove. It was a horse ranch. You could go, you could keep a horse there on the beach and ride it on the sand. You know, as you went towards Saddleback Mountain and Trabuco or Silverado, you know, it was country, farms and ranches and just spectacular.
and it sounds like, and we'll get further into it, that kind of dual life of going from living here at the beach to going out to these outdoor, more remote areas, and even further afield when you were on set, which we'll talk about with your dad. I mean, that sounds like a big part of your life back then. You guys were back and forth.
But I mean, me and my friends as kids, you know, if you had a little Schwinn Stingray, you know, you could motivate all over town. You could get a rowboat, you know, go to the peninsula. You could ride the ferry back to Balboa Island. You could hop on your bike and go up to where Fashion Island is. They had a big hang gliding meet there one time. I mean, they used to bring in Boy Scout, like 50,000 Boy Scouts in those hills. It was just, every day was a little adventure. It was all outdoors, right? So you had beach and mountains and, you know, the coastal hills and all these places where you could be free if you wanted to ride your bike, or somebody got their hands on a mini bike. You know, forget it. We were gone. Like 4 people piled on that thing, just ripping around. It's fun.
And the Bay life was super different. But, you know, you just touched on a couple things. You know, you were interviewed by, like, one of my favorite podcasts is Newport Beach in the Rearview Mirror with Bill Lobdell. I had Bill in here, and you were interviewed on Bill's podcast, and he has specific ones about the hang gliding, specific ones about the Boy Scout Jamboree.
Yeah.
And then I had Billy Whitford, who you know was in here. His dad was the guy working the tractor that carved out Jamboree Road during all that. So all these, I love all the history.
Do you know how long I've known Billy? I've known him 50 years.
You guys are close, but you're younger.
I'm a little young. Yeah, I'm younger. So Billy was the steersman on one of the original outrigger races to Catalina. And my dad's boat, the Wild Goose, was the escort boat that year.
You're kidding.
So I had, as a little, you know, I ran those little boats all day long. So we had a whaler, and I was Billy's crew boat. So I would drop those guys off and pick them up all the way to the island when I was about 12.
No way.
And Billy was the young steersman in that outrigger. So we go back to there.
That is so cool.
And then I've lived on North Star for, since 1989. And obviously he runs the NAC, so I see him every day. You know, I get up early, take Finn for a walk over there, and say good morning, just like I see you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you haven't gone far. So when you guys first moved down, when your family first moved,
Yeah.
so there's a spot, I paddled by it this morning. We refer to it as Duke's Point.
Okay.
Right? That's in
Yep.
front of, was that the first house? Was that the house that so in Bay Shores?
That's where we moved.
That's where you moved, right?
But we lived at
Bay
the
Shores.
Newport Inn. We lived at a rental on Balboa Island. I think we lived on Lido, you know, for a month or two. I think it took a while to get that place refurbished, and he was also working on the boat. So I don't have clear memories. I can remember the Newporter Inn, but finally,
The Newporter, is that the one over on?
the Hyatt Newporter.
It's still there, right above the back bay on the other side from the NAC.
Yeah.
Got
It
it.
was Del Webb's Newporter Inn.
Interesting.
It was a spot, man.
The history.
Yeah.
The history. So you haven't gone far. How far from where we're sitting right here was your very first, was that house in Bay Shores?
A mile.
Yeah. And you live a mile that way. Yeah. It's good living, right? You haven't gone far.
No.
That's why everybody at Pete's Coffee this morning was, Ethan.
Well, yeah, I grew up here.
Yeah.
And, you know, probably some people remember you because because you're attached to a famous person.
Yeah. So let's talk about growing up here. So you talked about the freedom, and I think we could go all day because even I had a lot of that. It's so different now.
Yeah.
And this goes back to Bill Lobdell. Like I said with Bill, like everybody that moved to Newport should be required to listen to his podcast to understand what this really was. It wasn't always this. It has a reputation in some circles because of how it's portrayed on TV, but that's such a small part of it. But the history is so rich. So I always tell people, if you don't know about the history of the Bay or the Pavilion or all this, but your history.
I mean, that's how my family started coming down. My dad came down to the Pavilion. He rode the trolley down, with friends, and they'd spend the day on the Balboa Peninsula, body surfing and having a good time. Lost his football scholarship because he separated his shoulder body surfing.
Where was his scholarship?
USC.
And that kind of changed. What was the impact? Again, this is the Ethan Wayne story, not the John Wayne.
But it all plays into how we ended up here, right?
Sure.
So he had a love of the ocean. He grew up, taking every opportunity he had to come down here. His friends were, they'd hang out at Christian's Hut. They'd go to the beach. They had those old little 30-foot Monterey fishing boats. They'd go over to the island. You ever seen pictures of Two Harbors or Avalon?
Yeah, back in the day.
Back in the 30s.
Incredible.
With hundreds of boats anchored there. They had a great time.
Yeah.
Still happening today.
And there was a lot of Hollywood that would come and use Newport as their kind of retreat,
I
right?
think so. As a kid, I remember, I don't know, Joey Bishop, Buddy Ebsen. There were a lot of people who had places down here. Charlie Chaplin. Can't think of who else.
Buddy Ebsen had that home on Balboa Island for a very, I think your dad and Buddy were like the two most probably long-standing.
Buddy had his big catamaran out in front. Yeah. It was pretty cool.
That's so neat. And I'm guessing that you grew up in and around a lot of those people?
No, not really.
No?
I mean, my father was in his mid-50s when I was born, so say by the time I'm 10, he's mid-60s. So he's, I don't know how much he got involved with partying and having a great old time back in the day, but he was pretty mellow by the time I came along. It's like, and he had the opportunity to keep me with him and take me with him when he went to work. So half my life was, down in Mexico on Western movie sets, and it was different than it was today. Maybe we rent a little house, or there's a trailer, or we stay in this, it was called the Mexico Quartz Hotel in Durango, Mexico. And one year they finally brought a big bed from the States so my dad's feet wouldn't hang off the mattress. I mean, it was pretty, if you think of somebody making a movie today, there's a lot of luxury involved. And back in his day, it was more project oriented. And so he didn't care. We lived in a little adobe hut, or we rented a house, or we got a thing. And there were times when you had a nice place to stay, but there are other times where you're just anywhere.
So world famous, but not with the same type of glam. And
yeah, I mean, he grew up working. He was a low man on the totem pole. So he, anything like anything beyond a nice bed was gravy to him. Wow. He didn't need it.
And the backdrop, you had mentioned you come down to body surfing, he separated his shoulder, he lost his USC football scholarship. Was that instrumental in him getting into, or the pivot in his life at all? To get into
major
Hollywood?
Pivot in his life because he lost his scholarship and he went to, through some connection with making a movie, he got a job as a prop man's assistant on the back lot of Fox Studios. So starting like sweeping floors, cleaning up, herding geese, like whatever it was. But he got on with a guy named John Ford, and John Ford liked him. He was a big, strong, athletic guy. He was sharp. He was on the debate team, newspaper. In high school, he was like in every activity that was available. Captain of the debate team, captain of the football team. Put on the school dances, worked at the school newspaper, was in the drama club. He was pretty involved.
Wow.
So he was well-spoken, he could articulate his thoughts and communicate, and he was a hard worker. So I think John Ford appreciated him. And that relationship turned into a very significant future for my father. But not for a decade, Yeah,
he had to grind.
Had to grind.
That's cool. Yeah. And so they were always making their way down here, and then we talked the story about moving down here and your time on the water. But you talked about, you would spend, you said like half of your time would be in Mexico or on set.
Yeah. Yeah. Somewhere Mexico, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona. Because he lived here, but, he's busy. So had a big ranch in Arizona, not a ranch where you go ride horses and play, but a ranch where you feed cattle and grow cotton in a pretty arid environment. So, feedlot, cotton, just miles and miles of flat, not a lot of shade. It was a business operation. So we'd attend to that, and then, making movies. Every movie's a 3-month commitment of time, and he usually did 2 a year. So there's 6 months that you're making movies, and then he'd try to get on that boat whenever he could. If it was winter, it was south of the border. If it was summer, it was British Columbia and Alaska.
Awesome.
So, I got to grow up around wranglers, stuntmen, movie people, crew on the boat, ranchers. It was good influence, good people.
For how many years were you doing that with them?
Till I was 17. I lost my father when I was 17.
And you started doing that with him when you were, since
From
you can
birth.
remember.
Yeah, from birth.
And so it sounds amazing from so normalcy for you is super different than normal for somebody
Just like a
else.
kid who grows up on a ranch, he knows to watch out for the combine or the fucking cedar or the, whatever it is. You gotta have
street
some
smarts,
awareness. Watch out for the propeller, Same thing on a movie set, don't get in the actor's eye line. Don't make any noise when they're rolling. Don't step on the cables. Don't block the light. There's just certain things that you do. Don't play with the pyrotechnics. Get in trouble.
I can imagine. And so when you're on set and you're living there, what are you spending your time doing? And how does school fit into that?
Tutored. So what are you, homeschooling, tutor? There was a great guy named Tom Hennessy who also was had parts in some John Wayne movies. 6'7", 6'8", 300 pounds, bearded, this big giant dude, always played a bad guy. He was the tutor.
Oh, that's funny.
So you'd spend 3 hours a day with this guy, and he made learning so interesting. So I think that's why I struggled. Once I went to Cardin Hall here, kindergarten through 8th grade. They'd send me away with a lesson plan or who knows what they did, but it was organized. And then when I got to high school, I went to Harbor. A lot of freedom and not a lot of oversight.
Too much freedom?
A little too much freedom for this kid, yeah. So languished, but gosh, those early years with that tutor, just going through Mexico and going to the airport or going by a ranch and talking about why you might want to know how to do mathematics or engineering or understanding how the irrigation worked, just these things, that you could grab onto and have an interest in airplanes or motorcycles or horses or, whatever it is. It could spark that kid's imagination. The stars at night, just discussions about black holes and all the...
It's like real life education.
Yeah,
as
it's like
opposed to
real
just,
life education.
You're like, yeah, you get to go, let's go look at that prop. Let's go touch that horse. Let's go look at the stars, as opposed to open a textbook, kids. And what an amazing experience.
Yeah, pretty cool. And then, so that would be 3 hours of the day, and then you're back on the set where there'd be some activity that they give you. I don't know if it was necessary or not, but there'd always be some chores. And then you get to hang around, actors, directors, stuntmen, wranglers, technical people, and making a film's very expensive every hour. It cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars at the time. So, you got to see talented people function and come together to accomplish a task or a project. And that was pretty interesting to me too, to see people from different walks of life with different expertise come together and make something work. And then to see someone who didn't come prepared or didn't appreciate the opportunity, it was distressing to the people who were prepared and who wanted to get something done, to see somebody show up who was maybe given a part or was connected to somebody, that whether it's nepotism or fame or something, somebody gets in there and they're not part of that machine. You can see how it gums up the works.
Interesting.
And so as my father got older, I would see him be slightly less tolerant to people. If they were trying, he would help them. But if they came in with any attitude and they weren't prepared and they didn't take it seriously, then it would really annoy him. Yeah.
And what would that look like when he was annoyed?
Oh, it's.
I wouldn't want to annoy John Wayne.
No, you wouldn't, especially because beyond the fact that it wasn't like he was going to beat him up or anything, but this is everybody's career and livelihood, and there's a lot on the line and a lot at stake, and you'd see him. If he had to explain something, he was very articulate. It was great to hear him talk. I don't know. But all that gets downloaded into your brain when you're a kid. And whether you're able to use it right away or not at different points in your life, it will serve us. And that learning by association or by being around quality people makes a difference in your life. And it's made a difference in my life. And at 17, I took a hard left and bumped my head on every obstacle that I could have bumped my head on. Just plenty of mistakes. And, looking back, I'd wish that I would have behaved differently in a lot of situations, but that's how you learn, right? So,
was that based on his passing?
Well, his passing, the crowd that surrounds, like once somebody like that is gone, trying to figure out
how to navigate what's
how to
real.
navigate. Yeah, it's challenging.
I can imagine. I probably can't imagine. We'll get back to bumping your head.
Shiny things to young people,
Well, listen, we'll come back to, I want to talk about celebrity a little bit, but let's keep going with you. You're 17, your dad passes and you've spent your whole life on set with them for half the year. The other half you're here. You're in close proximity to oversight and influence on all these people. He passes. I'm guessing you stopped going on sets for his films, right?
No, I mean, my mother and he had split. So my mother lived across the bay, and I spent most of my time with him. And he was, not well. He was physically ill. I had to take him to the hospital and put him in the back of a station wagon, drive him to the hospital. I'm 17. I'm just like, there's one neuron bouncing around inside my head. And they're like, no, he's got to go up to UCLA. You got to drive him to LA. So he lays down in the back. I drive him to LA. And he goes in and he never comes out. He's in there till he dies June 11th of my junior year. So I'd missed the last couple months of high school. And, when my father was involved in my life and we did schoolwork together, it was interesting and it was fun and I excelled. But as he got sick or split up with my mother or some other things happened, he didn't have time to do it. And so my school life flailed. So I didn't go back. I just went and took the, what the hell was it called?
The GED.
The GED.
So you could graduate.
And randomly reached out to a stunt guy that I knew who I, appreciated as a young man. And he said, sorry to hear about your father. What are you doing? The conversation ended up, he asked me if I'd like to go to work for him. And I said, yeah, absolutely. So I went to work for him. And
as a stuntman?
As a stuntman, yeah. And that was on a film called The Blues Brothers, which,
That was in Chicago, right?
It's in Chicago. It was a big stunt movie.
Big.
And
okay, we're going to get back to some of this, but let's keep staying here. So Blues Brothers, that's Dan Aykroyd and Jim Belushi, right?
John Belushi.
Yeah. That was a big deal.
It's huge.
You'd been on set your whole life, but probably not this style.
And not coming in as an employee and, the bottom kid on the totem pole. Like, I can't go talk to them. I can't walk over in that area. I got to.
How is that? Yeah, going from John Wayne's son on set, you're kind of you're royalty. To a degree.
You're a kid.
Right?
You notice things are different. I always knew that. I think I knew my place, but I could always go to my father, right? He was a very loving father. And we were close, but it's different. Now you're going to work for somebody else and you had to
take off that little Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a great learning experience for me.
So how do you learn to be a stuntman? Like, did they just I mean, did you have to train
I
for
grew
that?
up around it. So, I grew up on horses. I was crazy for motorcycles. So I grew up riding motorcycles whenever I could. I think my first motorcycle race, like dirt bike race, I was probably like 8 or 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
And, lived with those guys. So, and my dad, because he kind of invented the style of fighting that they still do today on screen, where you don't have to hit each other, you miss, and you use the camera angle to set it off. So I had basic knowledge, and I had set knowledge, and I had experience on location, and I was pretty game. And they didn't give me super technical tasks. I was a young, dumb kid,
Sure.
So I got to drive cars and crash them and get in with other stunt guys and roll them. And Blues Brothers, we crashed cars all day, every day.
Right.
It was
Was it scary or fun?
For me, it was kind of scary. I got in with this guy, Eddie Dono, who'd done a lot of my dad's movies and who doubled John Belushi. He was a short sort of fire plug, really athletic. You wouldn't expect that kind of athleticism out of that physique, but very talented guy. We're going like 60 or 70 on this big overpass, and then it's like sloped on the backside of the overpass, and we have to go through the guardrail, and then like 10 cars go over and crash and roll on top of one another. It's the first time I'd been in a big car crash like that, and I just wanted to get out of that car. Like I could tell I had to like take a deep breath because I wanted to unbuckle and shoot out the window. Did not want to be in there anymore.
Wow.
And then you kind of get used to it, but. He was nice. He just kind of looked at you like, calm down, whatever.
Old salt.
Chill out. Yeah, he's half on fire. He doesn't care.
That's incredible. Well, listen, we're going to get more into that. I do want to go back to a couple things. So we were talking celebrity. What was it like for you growing up here with John Wayne as your father? You're spending all your time with him, but you're also going to school. Again, celebrity today seems terrible.
It's different.
In so many ways. I'm sure. What was it like?
I think it's different. And it could be that I'm just not that bright, but I didn't, as a kid, I didn't really think about it that much. That's not how I was, like, we weren't brought up in that mindset. We didn't have security guards, we went to the market, my dad answered the phone, he answered the door.
Well, the difference is, I think, that you didn't need them back then, where today you couldn't do that. Like, if
But I mean, there were wealthy families in town that had security.
Got it. Okay. Super interesting. Now, also, growing up here, did you play sports, or were you just too busy traveling and spending time on boats and horses and motorcycles? And
Cardinal Hall didn't really have sports, so no. And then we traveled a lot, so that got in the way of any high school sports. But I didn't play Pop Warner football. I didn't play flag football. So when I got to high school and I went out for football, like, I was somewhat athletic, but I wasn't good at it. Like, I didn't know the game. So, and then we'd leave again. So, no.
Well, Billy Whitford tells a story about playing football, Pop Warner here, and at Newport Harbor High School, and they had a banner year, one of the years. But he said that your dad every once in a while would show up to the practices. And
he was, he played football in high school and went to USC on a scholarship for football, so he was into it, but he never pushed it. And my natural inclination was, I was the kid with the plywood and the bricks and, jumping the bike over 3 of our friends. Like, that was me and my buddies. And then anything on the water. So, piece of wood, piece of plywood, we'd drill holes in it, put a, string on it and tow each other around the back bay trying to stand up on it. Surfing kind of started, body surfing always, Catalina a bunch, but the football, basketball, baseball, nope, didn't do it.
Well, it sounds like between horses and motorcycles and holes drilled into pieces of wood, towing each other, like, what a great life. And the bay here. Talk a little bit about what the bay was like back then when you were growing up.
Bay Shores, we had those 3 palm trees
that are still there.
Yeah, they're still there.
So hold on, just real quick. So Bay Shores is, if you are in Newport Beach and you're going to go over, if you're going, let's say northbound from Laguna towards Huntington, you're going over the bridge over the Back Bay, the big bridge in Newport. Right when you get off, there's a light and you would make a left, and that's Bay Shores.
Yeah.
And the very tip of that, which looks out into what we call the turning basin, the
Yep.
big open basin, is what we call Duke's Point, which is the house you grew up in. It's been destroyed and rebuilt. But it is an iconic private little cool.
And they
little
didn't, like, he didn't even own the land. When he died, he was on leased land.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Wow.
crazy.
Interesting. But the bay was one of your playgrounds.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and all the kids in the neighborhood, this is the beach, right? So we were constantly at the beach. And to get to the beach, you just swim across the bay.
That's so cool.
No, it was awesome. And Bay Shores, pretty exclusive location now, very expensive to get in, whether you're on the inside or on the water.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy expensive.
Right.
But back in the day, you had, obviously my father did very well, and he had a waterfront home, but, other people had single moms, raising kids and living in the same neighborhood. And I think it gave it a different flavor, to have, I don't know, what would you call it, less exclusive or whatever it is. We had a great crew of kids in that neighborhood from, different financial situations. And we were great pals, and we all grew up together, and we had a great time. And, as the decades have passed, that's changed. And so I don't know what you end up with now.
Yeah.
But
Well, it still seems
we
like
had a great crew.
I bet. Well, from my experience, I can only imagine. I mean, we were on, you said, Stingray bikes, and
Oh, yeah.
I grew up, we moved into the Port Street, so 3-4 miles from here, not on the water, but we had free reign, and we had little
Yeah.
trails and
Oh,
forts
yeah.
everywhere, and then we moved into Coronel Mar,
It's
same thing.
horrible because we could go do donuts in dirt lots. Like now, the NAC is the only dirt lot that the kids have available.
And people like you complain when people do donuts in there.
I'm just like, don't fling the rocks at my
Right,
car.
at my car.
I talked to him. I'm like, man, I feel for you. There's no place left.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about the bay and where you live, and you mentioned the island. You mentioned the boat, the Wild Goose.
Yeah.
It's ironic
Man.
that we're sitting 15 feet from a bar called the
Wild Goose, yeah.
So we're going to go have drinks after this in honor of the legacy. Talk about that boat. I heard you in another interview talk about how the goal was when you finished a movie shoot, when you guys were back in town, it was get to the boat, get to the boat.
I had the feeling, I felt like he felt like he was always trying to get to the boat, like, oh, I have to do this. I should do that. At a certain point, I think he was just trying to find ways to say, sorry, no, I'm going to go get on the boat. And I've never been a giant celebrity. You can see how taxing it is on somebody to have to talk to everybody all the time, everywhere. And so I think the boat gave him some peace, like he could get away and, not have to be prepared all the time and go explore. And, people go, oh, Cabo, it's great. It's great, but it's not like it was. Back in the day, it was
a little fishing village.
a little fishing village, yeah, that had one hotel,
Yep.
that had a pool and a little pool bar. So that's when I got to go with him. It was amazing. The people were great. The relationships were tight. The adventure was the real. The fish were there.
I think there was also probably a degree of safety in a lot of the things you're talking about. Like, you could do anything here other than getting yourself in trouble, but it was safe to have your little kids running around on the beach and paddling and on bikes. And I would imagine that Mexico is much safer than it is in a lot of ways. Yes, no?
I would think so. Before the big drug business started, that seems to have, made everything worse, ruined neighborhoods, ruined cities. That's bad. And just across the board, it seems like we've given up, like a moral code for dollars. So like instead of having the moral compass be your North Star, now we have dollars being our North Star. And so that affects public corporations and how they make their decisions and how they get away with saying, oh,
Yeah.
we'll do it this way instead of that way. It's, and I think that's, going back to my dad and what he had a career representing was, a guy who stuck to a moral code. He represented people who came west and went through hard times and built this country. And so people appreciate that. But I do think that, if we're making decisions based on dollars, we're lost, right? Everybody wants to be successful and make money, but you can't make some of the decisions that people are making, right?
Don't point at me when you say that.
No,
But
I'm not pointing at you.
No. But yes, but I would imagine the access to the world and different places with family. I mean, when you spend time on a boat, like you're with family. Like there's not
I mean, they made you lock up your guns. We had a big steel gun locker, and so we'd have to lock up the guns, and we'd have to get a special permit if you wanted to go bird hunting and stuff like that. But we didn't, or at least I didn't notice a lot of stress related to bandits or anything like that. Weather was sort of the big, we lost 2 or 3 crew members to weather when I was a little boy. And they decided to take a panga up to a party up the coast of Baja, and the weather got bad and it blew over, and the only survivor, he couldn't swim. We had a Mexican Olympian in that boat, and another guy who could swim, and those 2 guys died, and the kid who couldn't swim tied himself to the boat and was rescued by the Dorsal, which was a boat that was on the end of Lido Island for many, many years. I think it was a local, I think it might be a Ditmore Donaldson boat, but the Dorsal was parked at the end of Lido. I think Craig Atkins' house might have been the house where that boat was. And that boat found the kid and rescued him. Wow. So, as a kid, I wasn't aware of it. I don't know if my dad was worried. You'd think he must have been a little bit. But if you're a kid and you have that freedom that kids don't have today, you get to go out there and bump your head and meet people and get sketchy feelings and
But I'm
survive
guessing,
them.
But I'm guessing on the flip, 98% of the time, the experiences on the Wild Goose were incredible, or at least a great family escape wherever you were.
Amazing.
That's so cool.
And to see like I loved my dad. I had a great time with him, and you absorb how they feel, right? So I'm sure your kids can tell your energy when you walk in the door, and if you're stoked, they're like, Dad likes Costa Rica or whatever it is. Like, they like it. And he liked being on, and I liked being on it too, because it had the 2 Boston whalers and rubber rafts and, masks and fins, and just spent all day trying to swim under the boat or trying to jump off the boat, or, holding on the propellers, whatever you could do.
Can you give a 2-second overview of the history of that? Because it's still here, but it was the biggest boat in town, I think, for a long time, wasn't it?
I think back then it was probably, certainly one of the biggest. It's 136 foot World War II minesweeper. Now, they built these out of triple planked wood back in the day so that it wouldn't set off the magnetic mines. And so they were smaller minesweepers. They could go into bays and kind of clear them out. And those magnetic mines, I think, wouldn't stick to them and explode. Wow. The Wild Goose saw service in the Aleutians right at the end of World War II. And the sister ship to the Wild Goose was built in, I think it's Ballard, Washington. I can't remember the shipyard that was contracted to build them, but the sister ship to the Wild Goose was the Calypso, Jacques Cousteau's boat. Kidding. So have the same hull.
Wow.
And so if anybody's seen the Life Aquatic and they show that little model boat with all the guys inside, that's a minesweeper.
Wow.
So that hull, and then they take those hulls, those surplus hulls, and they just build
whatever,
a couple rooms on it or something. And
wow.
Head to sea. But, my dad took that to Europe, and we took it through the, Mediterranean, and he went through the Caribbean and South America and, the entire coast of Mexico constantly. And we went all the way up to Alaska in it, British Columbia many, many, many times.
Oh, so that boat could talk.
Yeah,
right?
That was his refuge. And I think, 7 kids, 3 wives, business managers, the ranch. When he got on the boat, it was like, oh, thank God, I'm here.
That's awesome.
So it was always good.
And it's still here. It's changed.
It's still here. It was sold a number of times. My dad sold it before he died, and I think that's, that was a sad day for him. He loved that thing. And it was, if you could see photos of it from back in the day, you'd see what a beautiful ship it was and how it was handsome and comfortable, but it wasn't
ostentatious.
It wasn't fancy.
Yeah. It was functional.
We fished on it. We hunted on it. We went through terrible weather on it. It wasn't like perfect teak decks and, plush carpeting and all that stuff. It was.
That kind of seems like it fits your dad's.
It does.
Like,
but I'm like, it was comfortable, right? So it had, beautiful chairs and places to sit and, big old table on the back of it. Yeah, look at some photos. The lounges that they had were incredible. They called them the Hickeys. So we had one on the transom on the lower deck. There's one facing back on the upper deck, and it was like a couch that was like 5 feet deep and 10 feet across and
spent
a bunch of pillows. Oh my gosh, yeah. And then they had one inside too, and he was a card player, he was a chess player. I wasn't, and I'm still not. But they would spend hours playing cards and
again,
drinking.
It sounds like that's their good downtime.
But for the kid, I had the crew, so I'd like these cool dudes, and we'd spent the day getting abalone and lobster and fishing and building wooden boats and again trying to figure out like something to tow each other around on, like some sort of recreation to burn off childhood energy.
Well, I'm sure it's not lost on you what an incredible life or growing up. I know it stopped.
No,
when you
but
were 17,
it's times like this where you have to think and ponder and remember and try to articulate what it was like. It's impossible to articulate the feeling that I had. One, loving your father and your father loving you, and then being in I don't want to say it, like being in nature, pretty remote, like swimming into like tropical Mexico with sea snakes all around. You know what I mean? Like we'd just swim in, he'd carry his shoes, we'd put it on, we'd spend the day in a little village where nobody knew anything about who he was. It was just, that's gone.
It's magic.
That's gone now.
Right?
It's hard
because of technology, you can't hide.
Yeah.
What do you think he would feel about being a celebrity if he was a celebrity today, in today's world?
Man, one thing I'll never do is try to put words in that guy's mouth. But he would vote for Trump if he was alive. I don't know what he'd think.
Gotcha.
It's a bunch of nonsense. And we saw it a little bit in that. I don't know if he got involved with it when he was younger, but when he was older, he just, he didn't give a shit. Like, he came from nothing. He could sleep in a box and be fine, right? Everything else was icing on the cake.
Wow. Did he always hold that? Like, was that always his view of the world? Like, did he always, in your opinion or your mind, recognize where he came from? That he really wasn't.
I think so.
Yeah?
I think so. If somebody's
so cool.
like, "Oh, this first class isn't very good," you know what I mean? Like, it's like
that wasn't him.
What are they talking about? Like,
got it. Well, again, I think there's what. Let me asking a question. How similar was the character of some of the roles that he played relatable or similar to his real persona?
Man, I wish I knew. You kind of, obviously there's some of you in anything you do. There's some of me in this podcast. There's some of him in this podcast. I've been on TV shows, and so there's some of me in the character, but the words are written by somebody else. The situations are written,
Gotcha.
And you just kind of have to mold into those. But I don't know. Sure seems like there was a lot of similarities, and certainly as he matured in his career, who's more like who is Duke Morrison, John Wayne, Don Wayne, Duke Morrison. Like how do they interact and mold, or do people look at him and go, I know how to write for you now. You can deliver this line perfectly. I don't know.
And Duke Morrison was his given birth name. Is that right?
Yeah, his name was Marion Michael Morrison, and he had a dog named Duke, and somehow that name transferred to him, and so that's what my mother called him. Like if you were his friend, you called him Duke. If you said John, he wouldn't turn around.
Interesting.
So
we're going to start calling you Finn after you adopt your dog's name.
But it'd be fun to talk to him, because obviously I get to talk about him a lot. He meant a lot to me. I lost him at a young age, and 17, he knew that teenagers kind of wander off and they go out into the wilderness and they don't come back and love you again until they're, older in their 30s. So he knew it. And, I wish I'd behaved better sometimes. You think back and you're like, gosh, why, 17, you're just a knucklehead.
He just giggled at you. I'm
yeah,
sure.
but he knew.
Yeah.
He knew.
Well,
but it would be fun to get, like, gosh, is there going to be a point where we can connect through whatever it is and get an hour of information with people that aren't physically here right now?
Yeah, it'd be pretty cool. So let's talk about it. So you had mentioned earlier when you were 17, most likely after Dad passed, and you're not going on set anymore. Talk about how your life changed and like when you went from being jet setter to
I went straight to work.
Oh,
I did the Blues Brothers. I came back. I got on.
So you got your GED and you went straight to that.
Got my
stuntman
GED.
job.
Got the job. Like made pretty good money for a 17-year-old kid. And realized like, what are my options? Now I'm didn't do good for my last couple years in high school. My dad's gone. What am I going to do? This I can do. I enjoy driving cars, riding motorcycles, being with these guys. Like I thought I was in heaven.
And you were familiar with that world, right?
I was familiar with it. So Gary McClarty hired me for the Blues Brothers, real famous stunt guy. I think he's one of the founders of Stunts Unlimited that's still around today. And then when I finished on that film, I came back to Los Angeles and got hired on, BJ and the Bear, Knight Rider, Legman, like whatever, all those 80s TV shows. And so I kept working.
Was it just as stuntman, or were you starting to act in those as well?
It was mostly stuntman, but on BJ and the Bear, they gave me a guest star role where I played a stuntman. Oh. And then Knight Rider gave me a guest star role.
For anybody younger that might not be familiar with those, these are iconic shows and movies.
These were the ones on TV.
Burt Reynolds was the star of BJ and the Bear. Isn't
no,
that right?
Greg Evigan. That was the truck driver with the monkey.
Yeah,
remember?
Right Turn Clyde.
Yeah.
I think I'm confusing different ones, but there are so many of those movies of that genre at that time. Some of which were Burt Reynolds, some of which were
I don't know. Once I started getting the little acting parts, I ended up getting hired on a soap opera. And that was, a couple of years and kind of an odd, it was different than anything I'd ever experienced.
Were you a heartthrob?
I don't know if I was a heartthrob. But I was like the good son in a family of women, sisters and a mother.
Which soap was that?
It was called The Bold and the Beautiful.
That was a pretty famous one at the time, right?
Yeah,
one of the iconic ones.
And very successful for the family that did it, the Bell family. Really nice people. And for me, great experience. 30 pages a day, just go. I'm like, hey, I put my finger in my nose. They're like, no, don't put your finger in your nose next time because we're not cutting it out.
Moving fast.
Just go, moving fast. Yeah, so that was interesting and fun. And, that lasted a couple of years and then had another, I can't remember what was in between. I did Suddenly Susan with Brooke Shields and some of those TV shows you'd get little parts on them. But then I had a TV series called The New Adam 12. Where we were LAPD. It was a remake of Adam 12, but it was union actors and directors and writers, and then non-union crew. So a little controversial. The Teamsters and those guys would come ring bells and honk horns in the background. I don't know what the situation was, but it was a great job. Lasted 2 years. We did 52 episodes of that. So again, great experience because every week we do 2 episodes. So I'll show up here to do a scene with you, and in that room, we'll be shooting the next episode with other actors. So in one day, I'm going back and forth between 2 episodes. So it just gets you on your game. You become, whether you're good or not, I don't know, but you
proficient
understand
at it.
production and what's going on. It was a great learning experience.
Did you enjoy that world?
I do. Yeah.
You're
it's
still
really
doing
fun,
that, right?
No, well, I did a movie with a friend. We just all went and made a movie with a guy who's a photographer. That was fun. That was just pure fun. It's like if we got together and we went to make a surf movie.
Would that be called like an indie, like an independent?
I don't know what
film?
you call it. I don't even think it was that like
Got
that.
it.
It was just like we just went and did it.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. So you spent years and years in this acting, and you kind of just ran through it pretty quickly. When you weren't acting, where were you living? What were you doing?
I always lived here. Somehow, somebody told me to buy a house like early on, and so I bought a house in the Heights, and had roommates and worked in LA every day, and came back and stayed here on the weekends, and I don't know, but that kind of got me onto that. Oh, you can invest a little bit. So thank goodness for some people who give you a little nudge in the right direction.
Wow. And
so,
taking
I was
that
able
advice.
to have the house, and whatever that turned into that house, and etc. So when I wasn't working, I would buy something old and fix it up and use it and sell it. I was just kind of a project guy. And then, I raced motorcycles till I was 30, like every weekend.
See, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, every weekend.
And that full
motocross, desert,
Really?
Grand Prix.
Really?
Like where you go to Barstow and you line up on the side of the street and you run over to your motorcycle and you start it, and then you got a 40 or 60 mile loop out in the desert. You do a couple of those. You come through town. There's a big jump that goes over mud, like the old school motorcycle races. But yeah, I raced Saddleback, Carlsbad, Paris.
I had no idea.
Indian Dunes, Escape Country. What were some of the other ones? Glen Helen was one of the last ones. Yeah, like every weekend. I raced 250, two-stroke, and then open class four-stroke.
Wow. See, I never knew that. So we're going to bounce around a little bit in here. Career-wise, there was a rumor that you at some point became like a police officer or a sheriff or something. Is that, or did you only play one on TV?
Just on television.
Okay. I was like, really? I had never heard that. Somebody had mentioned that. Okay.
I don't think so.
You don't think?
No.
Well, you will probably
remember.
know. Talk more about acting. How, like, it sounds like you just did the small local one, but like, how long did you stay really passionately involved in that career?
Quite a while. From BJ and the Bear, which was in the 80s, getting a little acting, but still doing stunt work, still doing stuff like that. But and in between, like, I tried to go to Coast.
Coast.
I took ranching
Orange
and
Coast
welding.
College?
Yeah, but then I got a job on the soap, so I'd leave. So just other things would get interrupted. I learned how to fly. I was young. I got my pilot's license in 1983.
Wow.
I helped deliver planes for a used plane salesman at John Wayne Airport.
Do you still maintain your pilot's license?
I still have it. I haven't been flying that much. I started in ultralights. Like you had to get the little thing, put it together, and go to the desert, figure out how to do it. Had like a little book, learned how to fly.
Like,
taught a couple friends how to
really?
fly in it. Yeah, and then got my pilot's later. Flew for stunt work. Flew for the. You ever heard of the Return of the Man from U.N.C.L.E.?
No.
Man from U.N.C.L.E. was like a James Bond thing in the 60s. And then they did a Return of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. It was a big TV show when I was a kid. And so I flew an ultralight down the strip, chasing a car, and then landed at Caesar's Palace.
Wow.
This all before I had a pilot's license. And then went to flight school here at Martin Aviation, got my pilot's license, and then got more ratings as the years went on. But I found, I tend to do things for a period of time, like race some motorcycles for a while, gave it up, flew for a long time, kind of gave it up, switched to surfing, kite surfing.
Got it. Well, I'm going to come back to
got rid of motors is what I was trying to do. Get rid of motorized stuff.
Gotcha.
And then ended up with this dog and bought a van to travel with the dog and realized like the van's the best way to travel. Because in the plane, you're like, oh, look at that lake. Oh, look at that trail. It'd be so cool to be there. But in a van, you just go there.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk more about that
Yeah.
too. But okay, so
Work. You going back to work?
well, I don't know. We're going to bounce around, but I have a question. You brought up kite surfing.
Yeah.
I remember when you got really into it. You, Tim Carr, some of the guys were getting really into it. I remember. So you have this stunt background, obviously. You have an adventure background, and you're talking about flying and motorcycle racing. grew up horses, on boats. It sounds like all these things that you do.
Active, yeah, like doing stuff.
Very active.
Yeah.
Kite surfing is incredible. Can you tell a quick story about your experience in Florida a whole bunch of years ago? Do you remember the one when you went out on a very windy day? And
That was North Carolina.
Oh, is that where it was?
That was Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. I was new.
What's the punchline?
The punchline is, ouch, that thing hurt. I was a new kiter. First of all, I got rid of all the motorized stuff. I'm like, I'm done. I'm so sick.
Why?
Just like oil changes and this,
Just
and parts, and just
Not so much from a safety perspective.
no.
Just from,
I just was done with it. I'm like, I'm going to do something else, and literally got a longboard and started surfing. Like the first wave that I caught was at the point in Ventura, and I could not believe it that I hadn't surfed my whole life. Always body surfed, messed around a little bit, but never went and just surfed.
How old at this time would you guess?
40
Okay.
something,
Wow.
you know. Tim's a good guy. He would take me surfing every once in a while, but like to go, like do it. And then we'd go with Tim. We'd go like to 33rd Street. We'd surf like one day a week and do stuff like that. And he was into this new kite surfing thing. And I looked in the back of his car and I saw all the bags and all the lines and all the crap that you had to have. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm done with all this stuff.
You wanted low maintenance.
I wanted low maintenance,
Got it.
and I just wanted I don't want to have a machine to go have my fun.
I get it.
We're in Catalina. Tim puts up a kite. We're like out in the channel off the isthmus, and he's like, you should try it. So I go, okay. So I just grab the kite and I jump on the board and I start going. And I couldn't turn around, but just in going back towards the mainland, I was having so much fun. And the kite is it's like riding motocross, flying an airplane, and surfing all in one thing. This was early when they were sea kites, and they were like nobody really taught. Like in my crew, Chuck Patterson gave me some lessons up at Belmont.
Chuck gave me a lesson too, but I couldn't adopt.
I never drank more water in my life than those lessons. Anyway, I ended up going to North Carolina for a Cancer Foundation event. Did a downwinder where you take off in one spot and you ride 12 miles down to another spot. Really didn't understand what was happening, but I made it down there. Went back to get the car. It's obviously much windier. There's some storm clouds off in the distance. I'm with this girl, my girlfriend at the time, Amy, and I'm like, you used to have to blow up each individual like rib and then the front. And so all the ribs were blown up on the bigger kite. I'm like, I'm just going to put up this kite and try to just have it drag me, like not have to swing it around all the time. But maybe I could just get it in front and ride down there like I was getting pulled by a boat. Huge mistake. Wind had shifted. There was only like enough room for the kite to stretch out on this beach, and you couldn't get the angle that you needed for a proper launch. So the kite's beating her into the mud, and she can't hold on. I go, just let go. She lets go. It just yanks me to where she is, 100 feet, just boom, in a split second. And the kite's just vibrating in the sky and lifting me off the ground. So I pull the eject. But on the old kites, they had a piece of rope. And so you could hook that piece
Like a
of
harness?
rope on. Yeah, it's like the full power rope. So once you run that rope, it was maximum energy. And the kite just took me up in the sky and whipped me down through the trees. I think it was 3 times. Fractured 9 bones in my back, and was like, it hurt.
I remember that. I was about to say falling. I remember that clearly because you were jacked up for a while.
I was jacked up, and then they couldn't come get me out of the area because the weather was bad, and like no helicopter could get in. So it was like, hours and hours and hours. I felt like my back was broken, so I'm just like, hey, I'm not moving. I'm totally fine, but I think that I cracked something. So let's get that wooden board thing out and take me somewhere. And then they're like, oh, they did an x-ray. They're like, nope, you're good. Let's get you up. I spent 2 days there, flew home. When you break a bone, there's a certain type of pain that comes from it. And I could feel that in my spine. And so I went to Hogue. I knew a guy that did radiology there. And he did a CT scan. He's like, hey, you have 9 fractures in your back.
Oh, my God.
And one, like, vertebrae completely cut in half. So
You're kind of lucky.
Oh, really lucky.
Wow.
Yeah, because I didn't stand up because I just watched a thing on a guy who stood up with a broken back and paralyzed himself.
Wise. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. I just remember that
Yeah.
really clearly because it was such a
But
gnarly
that was
story.
back in the day when kites they were more dangerous, and there was no like syllabus that they taught you from. In fact, I was visiting a place called Real Kiteboarding where they specialize in teaching people how to kite, like from zero to hero. I think that's what they call their
I went there
program.
once.
You did?
Yeah.
Awesome group of guys, and I wish that I'd gotten instruction from them, but I was more of a like, if I could just throw it up in the air, I'll figure it out. That was the one that really hurt.
Yeah, got it.
Hurts to this day.
Yeah. Wow. I can imagine. Well, thanks for sharing that one. That's a gnarly one.
But an amazing sport if you haven't done it.
Are you still doing it?
Yeah, you
Oh,
can
you
do
do?
it into your, like, you can be much older and still have a
Between
great time.
foiling and
I'm not
wingding,
foiling.
all that stuff.
Just jump on a surfboard, kite, go play in the surf. You can go crazy or you can just enjoy
There's
life.
we could have a whole podcast on
No
sports
motor,
and stuff.
no
Yeah,
noise.
right.
Like you just ride out to sea.
That's
things
awesome.
just dragging you. It's a incredible technology, and that kite has some juice when you want it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you learn that the hard way too. Well, listen, so we were talking, thanks for sharing that story. It's a gnarly one. Let's pivot over to what you're doing today. You do some really great stuff with the organizations that you run. Can you just walk through the organizations, what they do, the why,
Yeah.
and all the good that comes from it?
So my brother Michael was like kind of ran my dad's business when Michael was alive. He's my half brother. I think he was 26 or 7 years older than me. Great guy. Michael died suddenly in 2003, and I was asked to fill in his spot. And I thought I would come in and organize and find somebody to do it. But if you really care about the person that you're representing, it's a deep hole. So we have two entities. We have John Wayne Enterprises, which is a for-profit company, and its mission is to preserve and protect the name, image, and likeness of John Wayne by associating John Wayne with products and experiences that embody the spirit of John Wayne and give back to the community. We also have the John Wayne Cancer Foundation, which is a separate 501c3 nonprofit, and it really focuses on cancer research, education, awareness, and support. And so sometimes when we can, we'll have the enterprise give money to the foundation, but it also gets public donations. My dad died of cancer. He was treated by one of the world's best doctors and researchers named Donald Morton. And we basically just tried to find ways to support things that Don was working on. Immunotherapy, monoclonal antibodies, cancer vaccines. There's something that's become a standard of care. It's called the sentinel node biopsy. So if you have breast cancer, they can trace the cancer through your lymphatic system and remove only the nodes that are effective. And it's much less invasive for the patient. And that's a John Wayne technology that we supported with Don Morton. We also started training surgeons. So general surgeon can come out and go into private practice, or he can match with John Wayne and be trained in multiple disciplines like brain, breast, melanoma, urology, GI cancers, and learn how to do research. So since we started this, we've trained over 200 surgeons. So these guys are chiefs of science and medicine, heads of medical schools, like top of the charts guys. And we fund research within that network of doctors. Don Morton died, and a relationship that we had with a Catholic charity that supported our Cancer Institute under Don Morton went away. And so when I took over, we had to find something else to do. So UCI was very instrumental in preserving our surgical oncology fellowship program that we had at another location. And so we established a new surgical oncology fellowship at UCI. And we have training going on there now. We just graduated our first fellowship trained surgeon this year. And then we're starting another one with Texas Tech. And also in the meantime, we started something called Block the Blaze. So it's skin cancer education for kids. Skin cancer affects a tremendous amount of people, and it's super preventable. So we asked Newport Beach junior lifeguards, we're like, hey, we got this program. It's really good information for kids. Could we try presenting at one of your junior guards programs? And they were kind enough to allow us to do it. That started a few years ago. We're now in every junior guards program from Mexico to Canada, and involved teaching this in 16 other states, and it's now downloadable and on the website. And it's pretty basic, but every kid gets a John Wayne Cancer Foundation hat, stick of sunblock, and they're presented this information that they need because they're going to grow up in the sun. So they learn what to look for, what to be careful of, how to do it in a responsible manner. And we make it fun, we make it quick, and we make it so that we can fit in and support the lifeguards that put on the junior guard program. Like, we're no burden to them. So I make sure that our staff is really, and our interns, they're the ones who really teach it. Like, we're prepared, we're early, we show up. If they need flexibility, we give it to them, and then we're in and out, and we leave the place better than we found it. But the hats have kind of become popular, and I see them around town a lot. So now I'm stressed every year trying to come up with a good-looking hat to send home with all the kids. But we're at almost 1 million kids now.
Is that right?
In the last
1
few
million?
years, yeah.
That's
and
incredible.
kids have self-diagnosed melanoma and come to John Wayne and gotten treatment and cured. And unbeknownst to me, a few years after starting the program, I had a little thing on my cheek that was just, my girlfriend goes, "Oh, go get it checked. Get it checked, it's melanoma."
No way.
So, I had this cut here around my ear, up across my face and down. I don't know if you can see the scar, but it was pretty significant.
Wow.
For this one little spot. And I was lucky because we found it early. And, if you can get to the cancer early, your outcomes are much, much better. So all I needed was the surgery, and then a year later they took a piece of my ear off, but I don't need secondary treatment for this type of melanoma. And luckily somebody knew what to look for on me. And that's the information that we're giving to those kids.
Outstanding.
So that's good. There was one other thing I was going to talk about.
Well, you have Block the Blades, you have the Grit series. You do some really great things in support under the guise or under the umbrella of the foundation.
Yeah.
You want to talk about those?
Well, Grit series is really a way for us to get out in front of people. They're sort of adventure runs, anywhere from a 50K to a 5K, depending on the location. We have 6 locations now. We have Newport Coast, Lone Pine, California, Pioneertown, California, Telluride, Colorado, and Fort Worth, Texas. Oh, and Moab. Moab we added this year. So
didn't you just have one like last weekend?
Yeah,
somewhere
last
that
weekend,
wasn't
Lone
on that
Pine.
list?
No,
that was
Lone Pine.
Oh,
Yeah,
it
Lone
was.
Pine.
Okay.
And then in a couple of weeks, we have Fort Worth. Lone Pine was great. It's blowing 35 miles an hour.
Oof.
Tents are blowing over. We couldn't put our arch up. Old people showed up. They ran. It's a way to talk to people about the work that John Wayne does in cancer. In an environment that he would have been in, the Alabama hills. There's also other activities that they can do. They can car camp, they can rock climb, they can hike up to the lakes up there in the Eastern Sierra. So everywhere we do one of these runs, we try to do it in a place where it's attractive to outdoor enthusiasts.
It seems very fitting and tied in with not just the mission, but the whole allure of, or the attachment to the John Wayne Cancer Foundation. And it just seems very fitting to the name, I think.
I hope so.
Seems
People
like
seem to enjoy it. Our runs are getting busier and busier. We try to do a great job. We have great sponsors. We have a great team. We have amazing volunteers. We have amazing volunteers that come out, and they're there to make sure that the people who are participating, who are running in support of somebody who's got cancer, or they're doing fundraising for the foundation so that we can help fight cancer, they're dedicated to making their experience great. So, man, knock on wood.
That's awesome.
We've got a great team.
Well,
Very happy with that.
2 people. Well, yeah, and kudos to all the incredible work that you and the foundation and the teams and the community supports. There's 2 people that I know pretty well, or I know Greg Graber, who's
Yep.
very instrumental, and Molly Kassouf. I don't know Molly as well. She's got a very big following locally. But
Molly's amazing. And if it wasn't for Molly, we wouldn't be doing it. And Greg's amazing too. He's married to my niece, and we've worked together for a long time. Solid guy. But Molly was really the key. She was putting on runs in El Moro, and everybody just felt good after her runs. Like she, it's positive. And so we talked about her coming on to be our race director, and she liked the idea, and we're off and running.
It's really cool.
We're like 5 or 6 years in.
Kudos.
So, yeah.
Well, listen, the impact that you guys have, and you mentioned the 200 doctors that you've trained, and the procedures that have been developed through the process.
Mm-hmm.
But think of the trickle down. 200 experts are touching thousands of people a year.
Each one of those surgeons operates on 400 to 600 people a year.
Wow.
So it's around 100,000 people a year who are getting. It's like if you take your car to a mechanic that doesn't know the specifics about your brand of car or your model of car, maybe gets it fixed. Same thing in cancer. You have a specific cancer, you want to go find a doctor that does surgery. Your first option is typically surgery. So you want to find a surgeon who can look at that and it's an art. It's not like they've got to decide what the margins are. They got to look at it. They got to look at the cells, and they got to make a determination. And so you want a doctor who's a specialist in your type of cancer. And, as we go along, like I'm open to looking at, all ways that cancer could form. Like, where did it come from? Is melanoma come from too much, ingesting too many seed oils over there? Right. Who knows? Yeah. But we're going to look at it all. Like we're gonna ask the question, and then we fund research within that network of doctors because they're young and they all have ideas about what could work or what might work for whatever they're studying. And so you want to fund those ideas. They can't get federal funding. They can't get venture capital. They can't get pharma funding at that stage. That thing has to be taken to a level where they can show them something before other money will come in. And so we try to fund them when they have those initial ideas and try to get those ideas to a point where it can then be taken and grown and delivered to the people. So funding those early thoughts, I think will be, it's already shown, it's already bearing fruit. So yeah, we've gotten people to federal funding, which is what you want.
Yeah.
You get some good money.
Kudos. Congratulations. Yeah. And thank you. I mean, that's doing a lot of good for the world. What do you think, I know it's a challenging question, but what do you think your dad would think? Because this started after his passing, right?
Yeah,
this was in
way
response
after.
to it.
Yeah.
What do you think he would, you guys are doing pretty,
Michael and Don did a great job doing real work in cancer, developing technologies. Nobody knew about it sort of outside of doctors and people who are doing research. Like the general public didn't know about John Wayne. So when we've done good work behind the scenes that the technical people know about, and we've affected the way cancer is researched and treated, and now we're getting the word out there through things like these runs, which take extra energy. But it gives us a platform to talk about it and share what's getting done by John Wayne in cancer. It's not getting done by me. It's only getting done because when he was sick, he said, hey, if my name will help somebody, go ahead and let him use it to fight cancer. And because he said that, 100,000 people a year now are getting cutting edge care that they wouldn't have had if he didn't say that.
That's incredible.
And so this surgical oncology fellowship program continues to grow. We're starting one with Texas Tech, and Texas Tech is in Lubbock, Texas, and that's really like if you're driving your car, you're getting your energy from Lubbock. That's where the oil comes from. That's where fuel is, sucked out of the ground. Like that's where energy comes from, and it's also where most of our beef comes from. So we're excited to be going into an area where those people take care of the country. People may not realize it, but they're providing us with protein and energy, and they're very underserved in the cancer world. So super excited to be working with Texas Tech and getting this program started there.
That's outstanding.
Yeah.
And again, just kudos to you and your family for taking that sentence, that statement from your father, and turning it into this incredible thing that's been going on for 30 years now, right?
Yeah.
And still growing.
Yeah,
incredible.
We hope.
It's fantastic, Ethan. That's so cool.
Let me just say one thing
sure.
about my dad. So you hear about people and somebody's famous and whatever, you hear stories. we don't hear, and like what I didn't see until I took over this business. We did a museum 4 years ago. We built a museum in Fort Worth in the stockyards, and in going through everything that was saved and reading all this correspondence that my father had, you don't realize how many asks are made of somebody like John Wayne, and how many that he would say yes to, whether it's $50 because a guy can't afford a baseball uniform for his kid to play baseball, what do you call it, Little League, to helping people in difficult situations. He gave a lot, and I just have to think, he was he didn't need a lot. Some people need a lot. Oh, this isn't quite comfortable. Oh, this eggs are runny. Like, he didn't, he was grateful for what came his way. And so he gave a lot. And you would never know it, unless you had access to some of the letters. And a woman named Mary St. John was my father's secretary forever, and she kept meticulous files, like going back to the 40s. So, in building this museum, we were able to go back and look, and you're like, oh my gosh, did you know this? No, I never knew that. Well, he did it, So many yeses to asks. Like, so many.
Says a lot about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's really, really cool.
So thanks for shining a light on the Cancer Foundation. We work hard on it. I'm a volunteer there. It's not part of my livelihood, but I'm proud of what we've done. And, I spoke to a guy, I think he was with Sloan Kettering. He was in New York. He was a top guy in research in cancer. And I said, how do you figure out what to fund? He goes, nobody knows. He goes, it could come from a guy's garage. It could come from the best lab in the thing. People have ideas and they need funding to see if those ideas work.
Wow.
So just keep going. He goes, I don't know if it's better to give, $1,000, $10,000 grants or one larger grant, because you just don't know. Could be that little guy comes up with that one thing, really helps people. The runs also give people something challenging, right? You do the crossings, and you work with Jack and
Shimko.
Yeah. It's fun to go do something difficult in honor of someone or for someone or thinking about somebody. So somebody who's stuck in that bed and they can't get out of bed and they can't go on that run or on that paddle or whatever it may be because they're feeling sick and they're miserable. But you have the opportunity to go out there and do a little good for them. And I think people, they need those hard struggles, and I think those hard struggles have a deeper value, a deeper meaning to the people if they're doing it to give back
100%.
to somebody that they know that can't be there.
100%.
Yeah.
And we've been blessed. I've been super blessed. And you mentioned Jack Shimko. We are Ocean through the NAC. We had Amy Spector that ran Ocean of Hope with Keith Minimitsu.
Yeah.
I ran that.
Sure.
Keith started it. Amy ran it. That was for the sarcoma cancer community. We did
Keith's
that for a long time.
amazing.
Keith's
We've worked
amazing.
with Keith over the years.
For sure.
Great guy.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people, and I give praise to all the people that are doing what you are doing, which is trying to help the greater community in any way you can in this narrow but super challenging, scary world. And like you said, the races, all those things, it's such a feel good. And as you said, Molly's, like, everybody seems so happy to be a part of those things. And you're doing good while having fun.
Yeah.
What a great combination.
Yeah.
In nature, with community.
Yeah.
I say these words all the time
Yeah.
in here,
Yeah.
It's awesome. Listen, where can people find these organizations best?
JohnWayne.com. So if you go to JohnWayne.com, you'll see all the verticals on the top. You can get to the Cancer Foundation. You can get to the John Wayne Grit Series runs there. If you guys are interested, please come join us.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Well, and we're almost to put a pin in it, but there's some I want to tie it all together. So you had earlier mentioned there's nothing better than seeing the world through a van. And you are traveling with Finn. Finn's laying right here. You're on the road. You now split your time between Newport and the desert area, amongst other places. so much of what you've said seemed to resonate or connect you back to how you grew up. You know, you're out and about, you're seeing the world, you're going off the grid a little bit, you're doing adventurous things. What are you spending your time doing now?
I think, you know, Newport Beach, it's an amazing place. It really is. This is my home. I grew up here. The bay, the beach, like I go down to 62nd Street. My office was there for a decade. It's where I go. I go down there every night, every morning, go swimming, take the dog swimming. It's home. I live right over here. But it is getting a bit crowded, right? And so I was experimenting with other locations. Like, where might I want to spend some time to see if I would live somewhere besides here? So I've been to, you know, Los Osos and Morro Bay and Cambria and Cayucas, and I love the Central Coast, and I like the small town feel. I like the foggy beaches. I like the cold water. I'm not a warm water person. I don't know why. I want to get cold when I get in the ocean. But, you know, I ended up with some property in a place called Pioneer Town and started a project out there, and the project has taken significantly longer than I thought. So final bits are in process now, and I had the opportunity to rent my house in Newport during the summer and went out to this pretty remote location, the end of a dirt road. And yeah, the first couple of weeks, you know, it was hot weather, and I missed the ocean and my place here and all that. But then it sort of grew on me, and you know, the stars and the early morning hikes and
the bear in the window.
The bear in the window. Yeah, it's crazy. I didn't know there were going to be bears in the desert, but there are.
Wow.
You know what I did? I took a meat freezer from my house here. It was in the garage. I don't have a garage there, so I plugged it in on the side of the house. Somehow the bear found that first. Oh. And so he got into some venison and some good beef that was in there.
It's probably good that it found that first before finding you or your dog.
Wow, man. He was, you know, banging on the door pretty hard. He was just bumping it with his nose. You know, there was these like greasy.
Okay, how scared were you?
Well, it was 3 a.m.
How scared were you?
And I'm armed, okay. So it's not, you know.
You go. I would have been scared.
I certainly jumped, and I thought, you know, that's a bear. He jumped and he turned around and he didn't want to cause.
He had a full belly at that point.
Yeah. So whatever. The desert's been great. Things are moving out there. I've really enjoyed having that sort of
escape.
If you go to Palm Springs, it's I feel like kids that are growing up in Newport, they don't have the open space that we had that really flavored and colored our recreational activities and how we played. So they're limited by urban sprawl and shopping centers and all that. You still have the beach, you still have the bay, but there's less access than there was when I was a kid. So to go out to a place where it's wide open and just have some weights sitting out in the dirt and an old wooden bench and a chin-up bar, and then I have access to miles and miles of hiking trails and my dog. There's no fence or anything. It's been refreshing and fun, and I might find myself living in a more rural environment.
Good for you.
I don't know.
That's awesome.
You know what I miss is I miss the people on my street. I miss you every morning at the NAC. I miss seeing Billy. I've come down and slept on my street, across the street from my house, in my van. And the people that are running my house are like,
I think Ethan's out there.
Are you going to live here now?
What a great...
but the van's been awesome. The van gets you out to those places, and being able to travel with my dog, and then you have your own... it's camping. It's not...
Yeah, it's not glamorous, right? But again, it kind of harkens back to what you said about...
It just depends what you like to do. We like to go swimming in any body of water that I see. Like we were in Glacier National Park a week ago. We went swimming in every stream that we passed. So we just stopped and jumped in. It's cold. But, to hike and be able to do that, it's pretty... For us, it's really nice.
It sounds a lot like the influence of your upbringing with your dad on the Wild Goose and going on set all over.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're doing the same thing.
And on set, there was a lot of, it's a Western movie. We were in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. Like we were out there. So yeah, I guess that there's a little flavor of that blended in me. But last night I came in the van, got a campsite at Crystal Cove, right on the coast. We were down at the beach doing our exercise this morning. It's awesome.
Good for you.
Yeah.
That sounds great, Ethan. Listen, I have a last question for you.
Sure.
There's a word that's associated with your dad, and you've tied it into everything. That's the word grit. Mm-hmm. What's grit mean in Ethan Wayne, John Wayne, speak? Like, what's the significance of that word?
Grit is you just keep going. You don't stop. It's like I was watching a documentary on the Navy SEALs, and they're like, it's never the guy who's in the best shape or the biggest, strongest dude. It's like the guy who won't stop, right? It's those guys, and I think that's grit. You keep going, and life is that way. Like, you just have to keep plugging away. Somebody stubs their toe on something really great, but if you don't, you just keep taking steps, one foot in front of the other. Don't stop. Keep moving. Slow down to where you can breathe, where you can maintain your breath and keep moving. That's what it means to me.
And that, I assume, thank you for that, could be applied to whether it's the cancer people you're working with or just Joe down the street.
Or just
dealing with life.
Work isn't always a breeze, right? There's tough times, and you have retail stores. You had to get through COVID and all that, right? It takes grit and perseverance to work your way through situations in life. And I mean, think of the time that we're living in now, right? Like, this is crazy. Like, never in human history have we been able to communicate or have access to such luxuries like we do now. I mean, I think somebody said, think back to 1965, right? Well, now let's go back 100 years to 1865. You're riding a horse and you're fighting with the French, the Mexicans, the Indians, scoundrels. Like, you're just trying to get west, right? 1965, you're in a convertible Mustang getting a drive-through cheeseburger. I mean, how life changes so fast. And now we have temperature-controlled rooms. We can have a cold shower. We can have a hot shower. We can have a tub that just has cold water. We can have a bubbly one with hot water. You can go to a restaurant. You can order food on your phone. I can communicate with somebody in Africa right now if I want. I can look at them. I can FaceTime them. I mean, that's insane.
It is.
That's insane. Did you see Elon's rocket the other day?
I did. Unbelievable. Incredible.
Big giant thing comes and lands in that
20
stand.
stories tall, and it lands in a stand. It's unbelievable.
So we're at a crazy time in history. Maybe the best time ever to be alive, to witness like changes. Like, I went from, I worked in India one time, and I had to go into the town, write the number out that I hoped I had all the country codes right on a piece of paper, hand it to a guy, pay him, then I'd go stand outside, and then in 20 minutes or so he'd be like, come on, hello, it's my brother. Yeah, how's it going? Oh, it's pretty good, whatever. I'm in India. This is in the 90s.
Yeah.
There's no cell phones or anything yet. It's crazy. And now,
for better or worse, we have every luxury known to.
Well, and even like you look at social media or the crazy. It's money again, right? So money got into politics, right? So we have lobbyists and we have corporations that are public corporations, which gives them an excuse to not be super moral sometimes. So let's get back to morality. Let's think about getting some God in our lives, whatever that means.
Be nice to each other.
Be nice, be kind, get control of yourself, work out, expend some of that energy, and then fix problems.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, listen, Ethan, we could do this all day. I really appreciate it. What a great story. Like, I so appreciate you connecting all the dots for us. There was a lot there I knew. There was a ton I didn't know. But keep doing all the good work. Thanks for all that you and the foundations do.
Well, thanks for getting the word out.
Oh, that's awesome.
Helping us do it.
Right on. Thanks,
Thank you,
Ethan.
man.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.